Hello and welcome to the Self-Storage Made Simple podcast. I'm your host, Thaddeus Campbell, joined by someone who I'm envious of his youth. He looks like he's 12. He's really not 12. He's old enough to be an entrepreneur, and we're going to dig into his entrepreneurial journey today. So excited to talk to the founder, president, CEO, whatever you want to call him, of Cactus, Tyler Sellars. Thanks for coming on with me, my friend.
Everyone that's listening is now just going to drive to YouTube to see how young I really look and then be disappointed. But thank you very much for the compliments. I appreciate it very deeply.
Hey, listen, when you're 51 and you see somebody with a baby face, you got to comment it on it a little bit. It makes me feel a little younger. I'll be honest, is one of the reasons I love hanging out with you. And we've gotten a chance to hang a lot in the last year. Is because not only do you look young, but you act young. You have youthful exuberance and you have an energy about you. So I'm excited to dig in. You make me feel younger and act younger when I talk to you. So appreciate that. I got to go back because I start the podcast the same way every time, which is this is about self-storage. And Cactus is a platform for self-storage owners and operators to utilize, but that is not your initial foray into self-storage. So I wanted you to tell me the journey of Tyler Sellars and how you got into this really niche asset class.
Yeah, for me as a Canadian, so I was born in Canada, and self-storage is super underserviced in that market compared to the US, that's for sure. One thing that was always interesting to me about self-storage is the ability for us to automate a lot of the processes, and I certainly wanted to see that in my next venture. So I first started into software working as an employee, grew a pretty good career over there, and then decided, hey, like I should really stabilize my life a little bit. I'm starting to feel a little bit more of an adult. I need to figure out what my investments look like, right? And so I really didn't understand the stock market. I knew that I couldn't control it. I didn't really want to play in that field. So I wanted something that I could always control. My career was one place that I could control, but the second one was where can I invest some extra money? And it wasn't any extra money really at the first time. I just knew that I wanted something of additional cash flow. So the first deal that I ever did was a single family 7-bedroom rooming house in Moncton, New Brunswick, north of Maine. And it was a student rental. So we had like one guy from Serbia living in the basement. I think he was like 6'5", but the ceilings were about 5'8". So you'd always find him crouched over making pasta or something like that, half naked in the basement, just having the best time of his life.
That's great.
And it was that introduction to investing in real estate and properties where I obviously got those, malicious tenants, but I also got some really great relationships and had a lot of fun in building real estate. And you're just constantly on the road. You're constantly in your car, driving around, working, doing things, grabbing supplies, fixing stuff. It was really a fun adventure for me. And I thought, man, I could do this for the rest of my life. This is the path. So I didn't know how to do it, to be honest. I just knew that it worked out for the first deal, but how do I scale this? And it's really difficult to scale real estate when you don't have a lot of money, that's for sure. And when you don't have connections. So the first way that I bought my first property was on Instagram. Quite honestly, I know that it's, I've had a couple lawyers tell me, stop telling this story. But it's just the truth. Like I put out a post on Instagram stories and I said, hey guys, I need $9,000 to make a down payment on a house. I'll pay you whenever I can. Would you guys be willing? And 2 guys gave me $4,500 each. That was enough for 5% down. I bought the property. I put a little bit of money of my own into refinishing it and then put it up on the market, got really good returns. And then with that traction, I was able to go back onto Instagram and reach out to some LinkedIn contacts and say like, hey, any chance that you'd be willing to give me 16,000 this time for a 4-plex and then 20,000 for another duplex and all these kind of things. So yeah, I just kind of grew the portfolio that way. Got to about 130 units by the time that I exited during COVID. And that was in multifamily. So I bought a couple good apartment complexes at that point then as well and made some good money. Obviously, COVID, the equity was crazy, but the cash flow was really terrible.
Yeah.
So it was a great time for me to get out. And then I wanted something new. So I decided, okay, if I'm going to design my life, what does it exactly look like? And for me, that was self-storage investing. I could automate a lot of the processes. I could run an operating business through a couple VAs. And then I could figure out some efficiencies in order to manage a new portfolio in an industry that I really knew nothing about, to be honest, at that time. So that was about 5 years ago that I started developing self storage. I built 3 facilities, and then now I live in Spain.
I was going to talk about that. I mean, there's about 15 questions that came out of that that I want to talk about. You mentioned Maine there. That's my roots. My dad was
Yeah.
born in northern Maine. My mom was born in central Maine in Lewiston, Halifax, Nova Scotia, actually south of where my dad was born, believe it or not. Moncton's actually south of where my dad was born, believe it or not. A
Yeah.
whole different sideline. What I really want to go to is first, I'm going to ask about Spain because it's very interesting. And you said something I love, which is I wanted to figure out if I were to design my life, what I'd look like. We're going to go down that road. Before I do that, like you said, you've discovered self storage. How'd you even hear about self storage? Like because that's not something that like you get real estate seminars talking about go flip houses, buy multifamily, go buy. You hear that all the time. Self storage is not something you really see.
Yeah, I was lucky enough when I was in university to find a guy that was like a multimillionaire at probably 12 years old. So he was investing in real estate very, very young. And he had the nicest Raptor truck that I've ever seen and just decked out. And I was like, man, I could love a life like that, like super young, didn't even go to college, just decided to go at it and found an industry and worked it out. He really coached me without really coaching me, but he was just a really good friend in the industry. And would instead of going to college classes, I would sit in his truck and listen to his phone calls and just kind of see how he would shoot the shit for a little bit. And really, he one thing that makes my life a lot better, and one thing that makes sales and relationships a lot easier, is breaking down barriers. And I love to do that. And I know that you're really good at this as well. I think that that's our biggest strength, to be honest, as entrepreneurs or as people, is just breaking down the initial barrier of meeting a new person, calling out things that are a little weird or a little funny or whatever, and making fun of it either on yourself or the other if you feel like it can work, and then making a conversation out of it. And he was so good at that. He would just, classic Atlantic Canadian mentality from Halifax. He would just call things out all the time, like, what's that in your hand? Are you an alcoholic? I saw Mike and Bo actually from this, and it reminded me so much of this guy named Adam, who was a coach of mine or
Yeah.
friend. This very and I think this helped out a lot. I found self storage just by curiosity, to be honest. So I was following a bunch of podcasts at the time, learning about how to invest in multifamily. That helped out significantly. Like I did everything just based off free podcasts. So this is why I love this platform so much. And then I wanted to look at new avenues, and I came across, I think, either Scott Mayer's podcast or AJ or both. And those guys, when they were doing their podcast like 5, 6 years ago, that really like sparked an interest. And I thought, man, this is a cool one. And you had a post actually personally on your LinkedIn just recently, and you're like, if this is the downtime of this industry, how lucky are we? You know?
Extra
And
space, 1% drop in NOI in the worst time in the history of self storage, right?
exactly. And I just thought I could do with something like that. That would be great. So I just put all my money into self storage, which probably wasn't the best thing to do looking back. But no regrets. I learned so much about the pains of investing in this industry that is served so well as the CEO of Cactus.
Oh man, I love it. I'm going to go back to the design your life, but I'm going to also say that we're going to talk a little bit about the relationship building because it's something I wanted to talk to you about anyway going into this. I don't always get to every topic I wanted to cover, but you've been a genius at that relationship building piece of it in terms of Cactus, and we'll get into that a little more. I'm going to go back though because you're relatively young, right? You're 31 years old. You're not a long in the tooth guy. You decided very early on that you were going to design your life. I'm baffled because I'm 51 and I understand the concept now and I'm able to do a pretty good job of it. Um, but I didn't even think about something like that or get exposed to that concept until I was in my mid 40s. How does Tyler Sellers in his mid 20s come up with this idea that, hey, I'm going to create the life I want to live?
I started as an entrepreneur super young. So I started a eBay platform, or like an eBay sales whatever channel, at 12, and I was selling sports stuff, and it made a lot of money. And that was I mean, once you start making $12,000 a month as a 12-year-old, you're like, what the hell is everyone else doing?
Yeah.
Um, and I thought, man, if I can do this, then what could I do a little older? And I think, and my parents were always entrepreneurs too.
Got it.
My mom was a hairdresser working in the basement. My dad was a financial consultant, to like hedge fund, or not hedge funds, mutual funds, selling mutual funds and stuff like that. So he had an office, he had that kind of stuff. And my mom worked in the basement. So I always saw like owning your own schedule in my life. And it certainly helped in my life as a kid of theirs, because if I had soccer practice super late at night or super early in the morning or something like that, they could manage their schedules around that without that 9 to 5 requirement.
Yeah.
So I knew that I wanted to do anything possible to make it possible. Well, yeah, make it possible for me to own my calendar. Now, to be honest, owning Cactus, I don't really own my calendar. I do, but I work like 12 hours, 14-hour days at most, or at a minimum, sorry. And it's like 6 to 7 days a week. So it's not really like I work for, or the company works for me. It's really I work for the company at the moment. But those things will change. Elon Musk said it best: in order to be fastest, you just need to work harder. So that's what we're going after at the moment. And that's just the burden that you have to take in owning a company that's pretty young and challenging some really big industries with some really hard challenges, like underwriting, especially for underwriting and self storage. So I'll say that, like, the easiest, it's not something that I think I thought deeply about, and I was really trying to figure out exactly what my life looked like. I just knew that I wanted to do something for myself because I could control that a lot better. And I think that's just the honest truth, is that with a job, you could get fired at any moment. The anxiety level that I had when I was working at W-2 or W-4 or whatever it's called in the States, it was like really stressful. I always thought that I was going to get canned, even though I did a good job and I felt pretty confident in my abilities. It was just constant fear for whatever reason.
I think you and I are wired so similar to this. We have so many congruities in our
We
life to
do,
begin
yeah.
with, but we're
Yeah.
wired very similarly in that. Do I want somebody else carrying the stress, or do I want to carry it myself? Or do I want to, and I guess I phrased that wrong. Do I want to be stressed about somebody else being in control of what eventually happens to me? Right? Because I might get a W 2 every week and I might have that relief of knowing the check's coming on Friday. But ultimately, I got to rely on Joe in the corner office to perform for me to keep having a job 6 months from now. I don't want that. I'd much rather be in control of myself. And if the outcome, whatever it is. I want to touch on something you said. You talked about how you wanted to control your calendar, own your. It doesn't mean you're not working. In fact, you're probably working more when you own your calendar than if you don't own your calendar. The difference being that if you do need that hour, you can put it in there.
Exactly. And I saw that a lot with my mom. My mom was a hard worker her whole life, had arthritis in her hands, and still worked her butt off in the basement of our house, had people coming in and out of our own home.
Yeah.
Um, she was such an entrepreneur. And then she lost everything. So she did a bad investment essentially,
Yeah.
and started a new business, a new venture into frozen yogurt. And the fad of frozen yogurt, how it went. So it just went up really, really fast during like maybe 2008 to 2012, and then just bucketed, right? So yeah, it was unfortunate. She lost all of her savings, her retirement fund, all that kind of stuff. And the grass is always greener on the other side. So one thing that I'll say is, if I were to kind of redesign this for my son, who I'd be scared for, I would say, okay, keep the job and do something on the side, but knowing that there's always a plan B. It doesn't really work like that. When you build a company, there cannot be plan Bs. It just
Yeah.
doesn't work. It's so easy to step away when things get hard. So For me, I just knew that I needed to. I think it stresses my girlfriend out a lot more, my life, than it does for me. But I've been in this for a really long time. I've been self employed for like 12 years. So it doesn't really stress me out at this point now. I'm more excited about all the things. And when a customer comes to me and says, yeah, Cactus doesn't have this yet or doesn't have that, yeah, it kind of stresses me out like, oof, are we ready for the market? Are we ready for this person or whatever? But we'll never be ready for everyone. And we'll never be able to do everything all at the same time. So it's just a challenge that I kind of enjoy. I love bringing this to my team, these challenges, these new feature ideas, these whatever. And then we put it in the roadmap and we say, okay, this is a priority for this is a priority for that. And it's really fun. Like that's another way of owning your calendar, right? So
Yeah.
it's really fun to work on something that you're so passionate about. And I'm really passionate about real estate investment and I'm really passionate about real estate investors. So how can I make that life a lot more fun for everyone to understand their financials better, understand their future better?
I think that you said something, right? You're working 14, 16-hour days.
Yeah,
The question is, when you look at your calendar and you see what's coming up next, are you dreading it or are you excited to do it, right?
both. Both. Like the honest truth is when you have meetings in the early mornings all the way until late at night, like this is 11:20 p.m. my
In
time,
Spain, yep.
right? So it is difficult. Like you don't see your friends really anymore. You don't really get to hang out. I don't have kids yet, so this definitely helps. But there's that dread that comes with some meetings, and then and this is just honesty. It's not like
Love it.
every meetings is super fun. They can be really challenging, and it's normal. Um, but it's a challenge. I love the challenge, not to say that I love it in the moment, but I love to look back at it in 3 months and be like, man, I killed that. Or, we didn't do such a good job. We could definitely do better. How should we do better? So it's fun. I think, I get to talk to entrepreneurs all day long because that's the basis of real estate investing. And they have individual stories. This is why you have this podcast, right? You get to sit down with entrepreneurs all the time and you get to just hear their stories and you get to be inspired by these stories or maybe, humbled by these stories quite a bit of the time. And so that's essentially my life. I just don't get the chance to record it and put it out nearly as much as I'd love to. But, we're talking about very sensitive things sometimes with their financials or something about their underwriting process. And so I really just love our community. I think we're in such a cool group of people. And anyone that wants to invest in self storage, one thing that's really cool about this industry, guys, is everyone's pretty well willing to listen to you and have a meeting with you. This saved my life. Just the ability that I could reach out to someone like Thaddeus, reach out to people in different groups, different sizes of companies, all the way to your big ones, to your smallest ones and just reach out on LinkedIn and then they'd schedule a meeting with me for 45 minutes. I was like, no way. This is the coolest thing. What a great opportunity. So self storage is very unique for that.
I was going to talk about that. I said earlier, one of the things I really wanted to dig into is you have an unbelievable way of creating connection with people. And I say this, I happen to be able to join the advisory calls that you guys have for Cactus, and you have them, you have a bunch of them. And there's 8 to 10 people on each of them. And so I don't know what the number is, but you must have 40, 50 people that are in the industry at a minimum that are giving you guys advice on how to help, make this more functional for their needs. How did you go about creating that network of people that are ultimately willing to help you make Cactus successful?
It's a really good question. This happened
Keep them
over a
coming.
year.
Platitudes are well accepted over here. I have no problem
Yeah.
with giving a little bit of praise, Tyler.
Yeah. But it is a good question. And it, it's not, it didn't happen overnight, obviously. It happened over a year of building this software. Originally, we started with portfolio management, so with asset managers and really understanding everything from operations, marketing to financials, and then reporting on debts, reporting to investors, reporting on portfolio for everyone internally, having like a single source of truth. So that was the first product that we came out with as a beta project just to see what we could do. We proved ourselves within that market. I think there's a lot of growth for us to do in that space, and so I'm really excited for that product to come out in September. But we realized over time with our advisors and with those people that underwriting was a really big challenge for them, doing it at speed, and so we tackled that market as fast as possible. The way that I was able to gather those connections, mainly LinkedIn, probably, but I would just call them for the most part. And I would say, like, hey, I'm Tyler, real estate investor. I think being an active real estate investor certainly gives some validity to what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And then just say your challenges that you faced are likely challenges that they've already faced once upon a time, if not right now. And then say, we're trying to do it. We don't exactly know how we're going to do it. So there was an honest piece, but we'd really love your feedback because we think that we can change this industry quite significantly with your aid. Would you be
Yeah.
willing to come in? And so, yeah, we do have 55 brands in self storage on our advisory. All of those non-equity, as you know, advisory members, they're just looking to help. And we don't ask too much of their time. So it's around an hour a month that we ask for. And we bring those people in. They can choose to not join those calls because they're non-equity partners. We don't own them, but most of them end up showing up and they love
Yeah.
to join those calls. And it almost has become like a mastermind for some groups. So yeah, it's been really insightful and helpful. But at the end of the day, everyone's just human. They all have their own things going on, their own opinions, their own challenges. And so if you can kind of just be human, I think with those people, and this is what I love about podcasts is that it's just a human connection,
Yeah.
right? We try not to get ourselves too serious. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but Halifax has a strong connection to Irish culture. And so we very much see ourselves almost like that Irish connection, Irish culture. And I think that not taking yourself too seriously can really play well into this. And so this is one way that has helped us. And I think it would help anyone is just be a listener as much as possible. Obviously, I'm a guest on this podcast, so I'm entitled to speak, I guess, a little bit here. But I I love I love to listen, and I have a recorder on my calls, and it tells me how much time I've spoke
Love it.
versus how much time other people were speaking, and I try to keep it 25 me, 75 everyone else, and that's kind of my goal.
I'm going to tell you, it's one of the reasons I do the podcast because it forces me to not be the talker. I love going on podcasts where I get to be the talker. I like to talk, but it literally, like you nailed it. You have to listen, and you have to if you want to get someone's story, you gotta shut up for a little bit. So I love that, and quite frankly, that's what this podcast is all about. I firmly believe that we can do business with a bunch of different people. There are different people that can fill whatever you need in your business. Ultimately, I want to do business with the people I really like. And how do you know if you like them or not? Well, you got to get their story, which is what I try and do on this podcast. I like to think successfully sometimes. That being said, I also like to balance that with making sure that whoever's listening, if they do, resonate with that person, also knows that they actually know what they're talking about, right? That there's an element to what they're doing that, hey, listen, I like this guy, but I also think he can fill the need. I want you to dig in a little bit with Cactus. How did the idea come? Why software? Where did Tyler come down this road of wanting to fill this particular niche? And I'm going to ask a two-part question, which I try not to do. Open-minded enough to not just go full force at one thing, but really kind of read what the market needed and then adjust appropriately.
I think the story of Cactus starts from my own failures. So I invested in self storage during COVID. I was a developer with very little development experience. I owned a construction company, so I had some confidence in what I was doing. However, self storage development, although being quite simplistic, I mean, steel and concrete, the operation side lacked on my end. And I just didn't know what I was doing. I also picked the wrong smart lock technology. I picked a ton of different supplies that or suppliers that didn't work well together. And I ended up having to build a lot of the software to connect those pieces. It was a frustration of mine. And I was like, how the heck are other people doing this? I know that this is like a 70% mom and pop industry. What do you do when you're running up against these walls? And I started talking to more and more real estate investors in the self storage space, and I'm always looking for opportunities where I can. And so I just realized that it wasn't just me that was struggling to report on time to my investors, report on time to the bank, or even just keep track of how my operations were going. But like management summaries from property management softwares, for the most part, are pretty terrible at telling you the truth of what's going on. I mean, if anyone's watching, this is a management summary that I receive every month. It's filled with numbers, which is cool, but it doesn't tell me a story. It doesn't give me the historicals of what's in the market versus what's in my property and how am I doing compared to my competitors. And that's the thing that I wanted to know the most. So I underwrote terribly for my properties, to be honest. Um, and just by a ton of hard work, I was able to make it work. And now it's doing okay. But it's been 3 years. Like I underwrote this to be fully developed, fully uh, occupied to stabilized, so 70, 80% within 2 years. I mean, we're at 60% and it's been three,
Yeah.
right? So not great. And I definitely wish that I knew more at the time. And so I thought, man, why is no one tackling this industry? And then I understood why. Because once I started asking people how do they underwrite, everyone had a different opinion of KPIs that are important to them and processes that they take. So, for example, public to find an ECRI, they go 2/3 web rate, 1/3 street rate, plus 20% to find an ECRI, right? But not every mom and pop has the ability as public to run their rental rates the way that they do at
Right.
public. So then how do you write it? And how do you know your numbers? How do you know how you're going to get to profit for not only you, but more importantly, your investors, because they're entrusting in you as an investor. So this is where Cactus really came to shine. We take a document, so you can take a T12, a rent roll, a P&L, or an OM, so on market or off market documents. You can throw it into Cactus. We extract all that information through our OCRs that we've built in house, so AI essentially. And then we're able to input that into our calculator. But we're not just a calculator, we're enriching the data with information from StoreTrack and from Radius Plus, and soon I hope Tracked IQ, to be able to make sure that that information can make sense to you and also be vetted by the market so that you're not making these terrible decisions without knowing. Because if you're an investor, an early investor, an IRR that says 45% with a 20% cash on cash in today's market looks great on paper, but and you're going to buy it because it looks great, and you'll question yourself like, oh man, everyone else is just, not as smart as me. They're not investing the same way or doing the calculations or figuring out the same way as me. And the more you know, the more you realize you don't know anything.
Yeah.
So this is why we wanted to tackle this market, is because there's so much complexity to underwriting in self-storage. People are moving out in and out every single day.
Yeah.
Rates change every single day. You have a ton of operational stuff that you need to keep an eye on. It's really difficult to underwrite for self storage. So I just wanted to tackle the hardest one. It's almost like underwriting for hotels, but you don't have that same brand recognition when you're a
Right.
mom and pop as like a Hyatt or something like that. So then how do you underwrite this properly? And we really wanted to tackle this. And then from there, once we specialize in self storage, it's really relatively easy for us to get into other asset classes and other investment strategies. So we tackled this really hard one first to prove to ourselves that we could do it. And I'd say that we're pretty close for sure.
I love it. I've been able to see it in action and enjoy I mean, it's mind-boggling to watch you download an OM into the system and just and immediately, 3, 4 seconds later, green light, red light, pretty simplistic and easy to understand, which I appreciate because I am not an accountant and I don't want, although I love math and I enjoy it, I don't want to be diving into, you mentioned it when you put up the monthly report, right? A bunch of numbers on paper or a bunch of numbers on paper. At the end of the day, it's being able to get to a decision quicker and you have to understand the story, right? So I love the fact that it just makes it so easy so quickly. I want to ask a question there. How surprised were you as you started going through this and using LinkedIn and making these connections at the reception that you've gotten in the industry? Were you expecting? I guess I shouldn't ask you how surprised you were. Were you expecting to have 55 people come and be on your advisory board?
No, but pleasantly surprised. I'll say that. Like I was relieved for sure, because as an entrepreneur, you always have these expectations that are crazy, right? So, um, entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs are plagued with optimism. And so I will say that I certainly had an optimistic approach to how I could do this, but I think that that helped me because I just wouldn't really take no as an answer. So a lot of these entrepreneurs that were, politely saying, maybe not, not sure if I'm that interested. And I would just say, hey man, just take 5 minutes with me in a quick call. And I'd love to show you what we're working on. And then I'll send you a video. I tried my best to grab as many of these great people that we were able to get. And so it worked. I think I even sent one to you, but like a personalized email or a personalized video to every single person that I really, really wanted.
It is
So
extremely rare for me to respond to somebody who reaches out to me through LinkedIn Messenger. Extremely rare. I think there's two of them. One of them was selling for James Hatfield at Live Switch, who is an amazing dude and great company that I love. And I don't know how the kid resonated with me, but he did. It wasn't James in hindsight. And then you're the second one where you cold outreach to me on LinkedIn. You said, "Hey, I follow your content." Maybe you stroke my ego. Maybe that's why it works so well. But immediately was like I was intrigued, and I don't know what it was about you, man, but you got a superpower to be able to do that. A
thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, it's not it's not it's not from a dishonest place, to be honest.
million percent agree. No, and
Yeah,
I don't
I think
think you would be a superpower at it if it was from a dishonest place, quite frankly. I think people that are dishonest in their intentions can't make those connect. That's what I believe. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that they don't make connections that easily. I think it is your honesty that makes it so easy for people to connect with you. Quite frankly, I'm going to ask another question, and we're kind of coming up. We're actually over 30 minutes now, so you've
mhm.
broken my rule, which I love because it's been fun talking to you. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the team building aspect of Cactus. I've been on the advisory call. You're behind the scenes guy who does the nitty gritty. He's unbelievable. Total opposite personality from you. So I want to know a little bit about Tyler Sellers as you're setting out to build Cactus. What are the rules you're following or the kind of guidelines for building a team that you've used to be able to get a team that complements each other so well?
Yeah. So you're speaking of my co-founder James, and James is really, really good at the stuff that I'm terrible at. So I'm not a calculator. I am not the one that would be great at building the underwriter, to be honest, or the portfolio manager, debt management platforms. That just isn't me. I just have a vision, and I have a simplistic vision of how I want this to be created. And so I knew as I was building it that I certainly wouldn't be the one to create the models. And James is. So James was managing a $2 billion commercial real estate fund. And, obviously we needed someone with that specialty, with that background to be able to make sure that we could resonate with any size investor as they go through their journey. And everyone wants to be managing $2 billion. So I think the place that really had to happen was some sort of relationship person, some stability on the back end side of things. And then our team is incredible. Our developers, we have a team of 8 at the moment at Cactus. And so for anyone that is interested in underwriting in self-storage, try cactus.com. Would love to see you there. But at the end of the day, I think really what we're trying to do and be a little different is be for the investor. So we're really, really passionate about the user being the investor at the end of the day. And we want to make sure that we help this industry as a whole. So level the playing field from these syndications, to be able to allow for just about anyone to become a real estate investor in this space.
So I'm going to go down that hole because I haven't heard this before, and you said something really powerful. And now that I'm thinking about it, I get presented as an accredited investor with an opportunity to jump into a syndication and self storage. I can take the PPM, go to Cactus, throw it in, and make sure that, because you guys are tied in, and by the way, it doesn't surprise me, but amazing that StoreTrack and Radius Plus, which for those of you who don't know, are data providers for our industry. They congregate all the street rates and web rates for anything that has been reported online and put it into a manageable place where you can go see it. I'm somebody who doesn't know storage, but I think this opportunity makes real good sense. I can go to Cactus and double check and make sure it's going to work.
Yeah, if you're a GP, it definitely makes sense for you to build something in Cactus because you can share your analysis and essentially raise capital through it as well. But if you're an LP, you can also do that, right? So you can take that PPM, throw it into Cactus, extract the information, get the enrichment from our data providers as well as our Cactus data, and then present it to your wife, present it to your friends, see how they think about your analysis. You can have an open book discussion through Cactus to be able to come out the end and say, okay, this makes sense for me as an investor.
Absolutely. I listen, man, I could talk to you for another hour. Unfortunately, I do have kids unlike you, and it's 5:30 on the East Coast, 5:40 right now. So I have some parental obligations I got to go fulfill. As I knew I would, I've had an absolute blast talking to you. How does somebody get a hold of Tyler Sellers? They want to see, I know they can go to trycactus.com, but I also know that you're somebody that likes to interact with people. Somebody wants to touch base with you and talk about what you're doing. How do they get a hold of Tyler?
My email is super simple. So it's just Tyler, my name, at trycactus.com. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, Tyler Sellers, Sellars.
If you don't get a hold of Tyler, call me. I'll get you a hold of Tyler for sure. This is somebody, if you're in the self storage world, you definitely want to know just a class guy. In case you couldn't tell that by the last 40 minutes we've been talking, just, a good person at heart. And appreciate knowing you. Really, really happy. I've been bugging you to come on for a while and you didn't quite feel like, and this says a lot about you. You didn't want to come on early when you didn't really have what you thought was a presentable thing to show to people. And that said a lot. That made me want you to come on even more. So really happy where we're at that point in the life of Cactus that it's something that we can talk about a little more and is presentable in a way that makes you want to talk about it, and happy that we could have some time to chat.
Maybe we can put Cactus in the show notes so people can take a look at what an example analysis looks like. But I'm going to send this podcast over to my mom. You've stroked my ego enough times. It'll make her proud.
I love it. And we'll make that happen. We'll get Eric on the back end. We'll make sure there's links to Cactus and all that good stuff and make sure, because again, I think I'm speaking from personal experience. I underwrite ground up development every day and, also look at existing facilities and to see the speed with which you can make a decision. Listen, I'm still going to go do a deep underwriting on my own, but to be able to make a decision in 30 seconds of, do I want to spend more time on this, is such a time saver over the long haul. So I personally see absolutely tremendous value, which has nothing to do with why I wanted you to come on the podcast. That was just because I really enjoy spending some time with you. So unfortunately, our time is over for tonight. That is it for this week's episode of the Self Storage Made Simple podcast. He's Tyler Sellers, trycactus.com. I'm Thaddeus Campbell. Look forward to seeing you guys next week. I forgot, I got to thank my friends at PropRise, proprise.io. Check them out. They will supercharge your deal sourcing in the self-storage industry.